The emergency alert blared through Starbase Arcturus at exactly 0347 station time, its harsh tone cutting through the artificial night cycle. Sarah Chen, lead xenobiologist, was already awake in her lab, poring over genetic sequences from the station's latest visitors. She didn't expect the next few minutes would completely reshape humanity's role in galactic childcare. Dr. Chen to Emergency Dock 7, the station AI announced, its usual calm voice carrying an unusual edge of urgency. Biological containment protocols in effect. Sarah's fingers flew across her console, pulling up the emergency details. Her eyes widened as she read the incoming ship's manifest. Razorclaw diplomatic vessel, she muttered, grabbing her emergency kit. The Razorclaws were one of the most feared predatory species in known space, 12 feet of crystalline scaled muscle, with retractable claws that could slice through starship hull plating. Running through the station's curved corridors, Sarah's mind raced through possible scenarios. The Razorclaws rarely requested emergency docking. Something had to be terribly wrong. As she approached the dock, she heard them before she saw them, the distinctive sound of crystalline scales scraping against metal and something else, something that sounded almost like crying. The dock's massive doors parted to reveal a scene that made Sarah's breath catch. 3 adult Razorclaws stood protectively around what appeared to be an environmental containment pod, their normally iridescent scales dulled with stress. But it was what lay inside the pod that caught Sarah's attention, 5 Razorclaw cubs, each about the size of a tiger cub, huddled together and clearly in distress. Dr. Chen, the largest Razorclaw spoke, its translator struggling to convey the complex harmonics of their language. We require human assistance. Our creche ship was attacked. These cubs are all that survived. Their biological systems are failing due to the attack's aftermath. Sarah approached slowly, her trained eye already noting the cubs' labored breathing and the unusual pallor of their scales. I'm not an expert in Razorclaw physiology, she said carefully, knowing honesty was crucial with their species. The female Razorclaw, distinguished by her more elaborate scale patterns, stepped forward. We know. But humans have a reputation. Your species possesses an unusual ability to care for young, even those not your own. We have observed this across multiple worlds. Sarah reached the pod, her medical scanner already collecting data. The cubs were suffering from severe radiation poisoning, likely from whatever weapon had been used against their ship. Their unique biology made standard treatments dangerous, but their symptoms were worryingly similar to cases she'd studied in Earth's history. The diplomatic summit cannot wait, the third Razorclaw explained. Our species' future may depend on these negotiations. But these cubs require constant care for the next 48 hours. We trust humans with this task. Sarah looked up from her scanner, meeting the enormous predator's 4 eyes. In them, she saw something universal, parental concern. Making a decision that would later be studied in xenodiplomacy classes across Earth, she nodded. I'll need access to your medical databases and full authority to adapt treatments as needed, she said, already sending commands to her lab to prepare specific equipment. And I'll need volunteers who aren't afraid of predator cubs. The Razorclaw's scales shifted in their species' equivalent of relief. You have whatever you require, Doctor. But understand, these cubs are the future of their bloodline. Their loss would be catastrophic. As Sarah began organizing the cubs' transfer to her lab, she couldn't help but smile slightly at the irony. Humanity had spent centuries wondering what would make them special in a galaxy full of stronger, faster, and more technologically advanced species. Who would have guessed it would be their seemingly irrational desire to care for any young creature, no matter how dangerous? The next 48 hours would prove to be the most challenging of Sarah's career. The cubs required constant monitoring as she adapted old radiation treatments from Earth's nuclear age, modified for their unique biology. Each successful step was met with grateful clicks from the adult Razorclaws monitoring via comm link, even as they negotiated crucial treaties. What surprised Sarah most wasn't the cubs' ferocious appearance or even their incredible healing rate, it was their intelligence. Despite their illness, they watched her with keen interest, quickly learning to trust her touch and follow her simple commands. By the time their parents returned, the cubs were not only recovered but had formed a clear bond with their human caretaker. The female Razorclaw observed this with obvious satisfaction. "You understand now, Dr. Chen, why we chose humans. Your species sees past the fangs and claws to recognize the child beneath. This is a power greater than any weapon." As Sarah watched the reunited family depart, she received a message from Starfleet Command. Word of her success had spread quickly, and requests were already coming in from other predatory species seeking human caretakers for their young. It seemed humanity had found its niche in the galaxy, not as warriors or conquerors, but as the ones trusted to nurture the next generation of even the most dangerous species. The first interstellar nursery would open 6 months later, with Sarah Chen as its director. But that's another story entirely. The success with the Razorclaw cubs spread through interstellar space like a supernova's shockwave. Within months, Starbase Arcturus transformed from a standard diplomatic waypoint to the galaxy's most unusual childcare center. Sarah Chen found herself at the heart of it all, turning an unused cargo bay into what the station crew had started calling the galaxy's most dangerous daycare. Today, she stood in the observation room, watching as her newest challenge explored their environment. 3 shadow hunter cubs, imagine a cross between a panther and a mantis shrimp, but with natural camouflage that could bend light, were testing the boundaries of their enclosure. Their mother, Ambassador Crix, had been called to emergency negotiations, leaving Sarah with cubs that could literally turn invisible when they wanted to play hide and seek. "Movement detected in Section C," announced Arya, the AI Sarah had specifically programmed to track the cubs. Approximately 2 meters above designated play area. Sarah looked up, suppressing a smile. "I see you, Nixus," she called out. The air shimmed slightly, and the smallest cub materialized, clinging to a support beam with her secondary limbs. "We talked about this. No climbing above the red line." Nixus made the distinctive chirping sound that Sarah had learned meant amuse defiance. The other cubs, Vex and Meridian, appeared nearby, their scales shifting from chameleonic camouflage to their natural iridescent black. "They're testing the boundaries again," noted Dr. Marcus Webb, Sarah's newest assistant. The former military xenobiologist still looked uncomfortable around their charges, despite 3 weeks on the job. "Just like the report said they would." Sarah nodded, making notes on her tablet. "All predator cubs do. It's not just about finding weaknesses, they're learning through play. Watch this." She pressed a button, and several holographic targets appeared around the enclosure. Immediately, all 3 cubs snapped to attention, their secondary eyes tracking the moving lights. "Begin training sequence Delta," Sarah commanded. The targets started moving in complex patterns, and the cubs launched into action. They moved with incredible coordination, using their camouflage abilities and agility to catch the holograms in specific orders. It looked like chaos to the untrained eye, but Sarah saw the learning happening in real time. "You've basically turned their hunting instincts into an educational game," Marcus observed, finally beginning to understand. "They think they're practicing hunting, but they're actually learning impulse control, teamwork, and basic mathematics," Sarah finished. "Ambassador KRX told me their species typically takes 3 cycles to master basic coordination skills. These 3 are already halfway there in just 2 weeks." The lesson was interrupted by an urgent call from medical. "Dr. Chen, we have a situation with the crystalline serpent hatchlings. Their temperature regulation is fluctuating outside normal parameters." Sarah was already moving. "Arya, maintain standard protocols. Marcus, with me." They hurried through the station's corridors, passing several startled diplomats as they rushed to the medical bay. The crystalline serpent hatchlings were another recent addition, beings of living crystal that absorbed solar radiation for sustenance. Their parent had been critically injured in an asteroid mining accident, leaving 7 vulnerable hatchlings in need of specialized care. In the medical bay, the hatchlings' crystalline bodies were pulsing with unstable light patterns. Sarah immediately recognized the problem. They were approaching their first major growth phase without their parents' stabilizing influence. Their crystal matrix is destabilizing, one of the medical officers reported. Standard containment fields aren't working. Sarah thought quickly, remembering something from her studies of Earth's geology. Marcus, help me modify the quantum resonance chamber. We need to match the frequency of their parents' crystalline structure. Working together, they adjusted the chamber's settings, carefully replicating the specific resonance that crystalline serpent parents use to help their young stabilize during growth phases. Slowly, the hatchlings' erratic pulsing steadied, their crystal structures beginning to align properly. How did you know that would work? Marcus asked, watching in fascination as the hatchlings settled into a stable growth pattern. Sarah smiled, gently adjusting the resonance frequency. Humans have been studying crystals for millennia. We might not be living crystal ourselves, but we understand the principles. Sometimes, the best caregiving comes from understanding the science behind the instincts. As if to prove her point, the smallest hatchling began emitting a soft, melodic hum, the crystalline serpent equivalent of a contented purr. The sound resonated with its siblings, creating a harmonic pattern that any crystalline parent would recognize as healthy development. That's why they trust us, Sarah explained, making detailed notes of the frequency patterns for future reference. Not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we take the time to understand. We adapt. We figure out what each species needs, even if it's completely different from our own young. The success with the hatchlings quickly became another chapter in Starbase Arcturus's growing reputation. Sarah's techniques were being studied and replicated at other stations, as more species began to recognize humanity's unique talent for xenopedagogy, the care and teaching of alien young. But as Sarah would soon learn, not everyone in the galaxy appreciated this new human specialty. Dark forces were moving, forces that saw humanity's growing influence over the galaxy's next generation as a threat that needed to be eliminated. The warning signs began subtly. First, it was just minor equipment malfunctions in the nursery sectors. Then environmental controls started fluctuating at random intervals. Sarah Chen might have dismissed it all as typical station problems if it hadn't been for the cubs' reactions. The shadow hunter cubs had been unusually agitated for days, their camouflage patterns shifting erratically even during sleep cycles. The crystalline serpent hatchlings were resonating at frequencies that Sarah had never recorded before. Even the normally placid void whale calf, a recent arrival that resembled a miniature galaxy wrapped in cetacean form, had started emitting distress harmonics. They know something we don't, Sarah told Station Commander Rivera during their emergency meeting. Every predator species we're caring for is showing signs of acute threat response. Rivera studied the data scrolling across his screen. Dr. Chen, I respect your expertise, but we can't lock down a major diplomatic hub based on the behavior of babies. Sir, Marcus interjected, surprising Sarah with his vehemence, these babies have sensory capabilities far beyond our technology. The shadow hunter cubs can detect quantum fluctuations. The crystalline serpents can sense changes in subspace radiation. If they're all acting like this. A violent shudder ran through the station, cutting him off. The lights flickered, and Sarah's tablet erupted with alerts from the nursery sectors. Multiple containment field fluctuations, Arya reported. Detecting unauthorized access attempts in primary system cores. Security protocols being overridden. Rivera was already moving. Full lockdown. All security teams, another tremor shook the station, stronger this time. Warning klaxons began blaring. The cubs, Sarah gasped, already running. Marcus, get to medical and protect the hatchlings. I'll handle the nursery. She sprinted through corridors that were quickly filling with panicked station personnel. As she ran, she accessed Arya's systems through her tablet, trying to understand what was happening. The attack pattern was precise, targeting critical systems in a sequence that suggested intimate knowledge of the station's architecture. Reaching the nursery, Sarah found chaos. The containment fields were failing, and the cubs were in a frenzy. But not from fear, from protective rage. The Shadow Hunter cubs had formed a defensive perimeter around the younger species, their camouflage rippling as they tracked something Sarah couldn't see. Arya, full spectrum scan. Sarah commanded, sealing the nursery doors behind her. Show me what they're seeing. The AI complied, and Sarah's blood ran cold. Cloaked figures were moving through the station's maintenance systems, humanoid forms that seemed to phase in and out of normal space. They were heading for the station's quantum core, and the nursery was in their path. Sarah made a decision that would later be called either brilliant or insane, depending on who you asked. She opened a direct channel to Station Command. Commander, I need authorization to initiate Protocol Omega-7. Absolutely not, Rivera's voice crackled through static. Those containment fields are the only thing protecting the station if the cubs. Sir, with respect, those cubs are the only thing protecting the station right now. They can see the intruders. They can fight them. But only if we let them. A pause filled with weapons fire and alarms. Then, granted. God help us all. Sarah turned to the cubs, who were watching her with predatory intensity. In that moment, she understood something profound about why humans had become the galaxy's designated caretakers. It wasn't just their ability to nurture, it was their ability to know when to let natural instincts take over. Arya, execute Protocol Omega-7. Authorization Chen Alpha 1. The containment fields dissolved. Immediately, the Shadow Hunter cubs vanished, their natural camouflage making them invisible to normal sight. The void whale calf began emitting specific frequencies that revealed the intruders' positions. The crystalline serpent hatchlings, still in medical, started resonating in patterns that disrupted the attackers' phase-shifting technology. What followed was a demonstration of why predator species dominated their home worlds. The cubs moved with lethal precision, their instincts enhanced by weeks of Sarah's training exercises. They weren't just attacking, they were coordinating, using tactics they'd learned through play to protect their home. Sarah coordinated it all through Arya, using the station's sensors to direct the cubs toward threats. Security teams followed in their wake, securing areas the cubs had cleared. Within 20 minutes, the attack was over. The aftermath revealed a sophisticated plot by a radical anti-human group called Purity Front. They had planned to destroy the station, hoping to end the growing trust between humanity and predator species. Instead, they had proven exactly why that trust existed. You turned our nursery into a defense system, Rivera said later, watching as Sarah checked each cub for injuries. No, Sarah corrected, gently treating a minor scratch on Nixus's secondary limb. They were always a defense system. We just helped them understand when and how to use their abilities. As news of the incident spread, more species began requesting human caretakers for their young. They had seen something remarkable, not just humans' ability to nurture, but their wisdom in knowing when to step back and trust in natural instincts. But for Sarah, the most important moment came when Ambassador Crix returned to find her cubs sleeping peacefully in their enclosure. You let them fight, the ambassador observed. I let them protect, Sarah corrected. There's a difference. Crix's scales shifted in approval. Perhaps that is why we trust humans with our young. You understand both nurture and nature, and most importantly, you know when each is needed. 6 months after the Purity Front attack, Starbase Arcturus had transformed. What began as an emergency nursery had evolved into the Galactic Interspecies Care Academy, GICA, the first official institution dedicated to training humans in xenopedagogy. Sarah Chen found herself not just caring for alien young, but teaching others how to do the same. Today, she stood before a class of 30 human cadets, while various alien cubs played in specially designed enclosures behind her. The observation room was packed with representatives from 24 species, all eager to understand why their most dangerous predators trusted humans with their children. The key isn't just caring, Sarah explained, as a young magma drake, essentially a small dragon that lived in stellar coronas, practiced temperature control exercises nearby. It's understanding. Every species has evolved different ways of protecting and nurturing their young. Our job isn't to impose human methods, but to adapt and enhance natural instincts. A cadet raised her hand. Dr. Chen, how do we know when to intervene and when to step back? After what happened during the attack? Sarah nodded, appreciating the question. The station attack had become a case study in xenopedagogy. Watch the magma drake, she instructed. The class turned to observe as the young creature struggled to maintain a stable temperature in its containment field. Right now, its core temperature is fluctuating. Traditional human instinct says to help immediately. But observe its parent. She gestured to the adult magma drake watching from behind a thermal barrier. The massive creature remained calm, its stellar hot body perfectly controlled. The parent knows this is a necessary part of development. Our job isn't to prevent the struggle, but to ensure it happens safely and productively. She adjusted the containment field slightly, creating a temperature gradient. The young drake immediately began using it to practice regulation, just as it would near a star's surface. A movement caught Sarah's attention. One of the shadow hunter cubs, Nixus, now nearly adolescent, had materialized near the observation window. The alien diplomats tensed, but Sarah smiled. Nixus had become something of a teaching assistant, demonstrating complex behaviors for the cadets. Consider what happened during the attack, Sarah continued. Those cubs could have been evacuated to safety. Instead, they chose to defend their home. Why? Because we had respected their predatory nature while teaching them when to use it constructively. The lesson was interrupted by an urgent message. Dr. Chen, Arya announced, priority communication from the Galactic Council. Sarah's heart raced. The Council had been debating humanity's role in interspecies relations for months. Continue the lesson, Marcus, she instructed, heading to her office. The Council's holographic projection filled her office, representatives from the galaxy's most powerful species, including several whose young were currently under human care. The Council leader, a void archon whose form rippled like a black hole's event horizon, spoke first. Dr. Chen, your work has forced us to re-evaluate humanity's position in galactic society. Some found it concerning that we entrust our most vulnerable to a species barely out of its own planetary system. Sarah waited, knowing this moment could define humanity's future. However, the Razorclaw representative continued, recent events have proven that humans possess something unique. You understand the balance between protection and growth, between nurture and challenge. This is rare. The Council leaders' form shifted. We are establishing a new position, Guardians of Growth. Humanity will be officially recognized as the galaxy's primary caretakers of young predator species. Your academy will be the first of many. Sarah felt the weight of the moment. We accept this honor, but with one condition. The Council stirred, conditions were rarely offered to their declarations. This must be a partnership, not a service. We want to learn from each species, to understand their ways of nurturing. Humanity's gift isn't that we're better caretakers, it's that we're willing to adapt and combine different methods of care. There was a long pause before the Council leader spoke again. Wisely said. Perhaps this is why even our most aggressive species trust you with their young. You do not seek to change them, but to understand and guide them. The meeting concluded with plans for expanding the academy across multiple sectors. As Sarah walked back to her class, she passed the nursery where it had all started. The shadow hunter cubs were teaching younger species their hunting games. The crystalline serpents were helping new hatchlings stabilize their growth patterns. The void whale calf was singing education harmonics to a group of diverse alien young. This, she realized, was humanity's true gift to the galaxy. Not just the ability to care for dangerous young, but the vision to see how different species could learn from each other. They weren't just raising cubs, they were building bridges between civilizations, one child at a time. Entering the classroom, Sarah found her cadets engaged in practical exercises with various alien young. She watched as humans and aliens worked together, each learning from the other, and smiled. The galaxy's most dangerous predators trusted humans with their cubs not because humans were special, but because they understood that every species had something to teach about caring for the next generation. 20 years after the establishment of the Galactic Interspecies Care Academy, Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the newly constructed Guardian Prime Station, a massive complex that dwarfed the original starbase Arcturus. Below her, dozens of specialized habitats housed young from over 50 predator species, while human caretakers worked alongside alien parents in a remarkable display of interspecies cooperation. But today was special. Today marked the return of her first students, not the human ones, but the cubs themselves. Director Chen, Aria's evolved voice announced, "The Shadowhunter delegation has arrived." Sarah turned to see 3 magnificent adult Shadowhunters phase into visibility. Her heart swelled with recognition, Nixus, Vex, and Meridian, now fully grown and serving as ambassadors for their species. Behind them came their own cubs, eyes bright with curiosity. "My old troublemakers," Sarah said warmly, using their childhood nickname. Or should I say, distinguished representatives of the Shadowhunter Confederacy. Nixus stepped forward, her camouflage rippling with amusement. "We will always be your troublemakers, Sarah. That's why we're here. Our cubs need the same chance we had, to learn from humans, to grow strong under your guidance." The moment was interrupted by a familiar crystalline chiming. Through another door came the adult crystalline serpents she had once helped through their first growth phase, their bodies now intricate lattices of living crystal. They too brought young, their crystalline forms still soft and developing. Throughout the day, more of her former charges arrived, the magma drake who now regulated stellar engineering projects, the void whale who had become a master of interstellar navigation, and dozens more. Each brought their own young, creating a living testament to the trust between species. "You've created something remarkable," Marcus said, now her second in command. He watched as human caretakers welcomed the new arrivals, easily adapting their methods for each species. "Did you ever imagine it would grow like this?" Sarah shook her head, remembering that first desperate day with the Razorclaw cubs. "I just knew we had something to offer. Humans have always been adapters, learners. We took our instinct to protect young and turned it into a bridge between worlds." The station's grand atrium had been converted for a special ceremony. Representatives from every major species gathered as Sarah took the podium. Above them, holographic displays showed similar ceremonies taking place at human-run care centers across the galaxy. 20 years ago, Sarah began, we discovered that humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't about being the strongest or the most advanced. It was about understanding a fundamental truth, that caring for the young of other species requires both strength and wisdom, both protection and restraint. She gestured to the assembled aliens. "Each of you trusted us with your most precious resource, your children. Not because we were perfect, but because we were willing to learn, to adapt, to combine the best of all our species' methods of nurturing." A small commotion drew attention to the back of the room. A group of young Razorclaws had started a playful wrestling match, their crystalline scales flashing. Instead of stopping them, their human caretaker guided them into a training exercise, turning their natural aggression into a learning opportunity. "That," Sarah said, "is why predators trust humans with their cubs. We don't just protect, we understand. We don't just nurture, we guide. And most importantly, we recognize that every species, no matter how dangerous they might seem, has valuable lessons to teach about caring for the next generation." The ceremony concluded with a tradition that had become standard at all Guardian facilities. The lights dimmed, and each species young demonstrated their unique abilities, shadow hunters dancing through light and shadow, crystalline serpents creating harmonious resonance patterns, void whales singing songs that touched the fabric of space itself. Human caretakers moved among them, not controlling but coordinating, turning natural instincts into beautiful displays of interspecies cooperation. Later, as Sarah watched the new cubs settling into their habitats, Nixus approached her again. "You know, some still question why we trust humans with our young. They say you're too unpredictable, too emotional." Sarah smiled, watching a young human caretaker expertly handle a particularly energetic magma drake hatchling. "And what do you tell them?" "I tell them about the day you let us fight to protect our home. How you understood that sometimes caring means stepping back. How you taught us to be both predators and protectors." Nixus's camouflage shifted in a pattern of deep respect. "I tell them that humans are trusted with our cubs not because they're perfect, but because they understand that raising the next generation is about finding the balance between what we are and what we can become." As the station's night cycle began, Sarah made her final rounds. In each habitat, she saw the legacy of that first desperate experiment, humans and aliens working together to nurture the future of 1,000 worlds. The galaxy's most dangerous predators trusted humans with their cubs not because humans were the best caretakers, but because they had proven to be the best partners in care. And that, perhaps, was humanity's greatest achievement, turning the simple act of caring for young into a force that united the galaxy.